Is this thing on? Yeah. All right. First of all, another public service announcement. After this talk, just please don't run out because we have some free stuff for you. So there's going to be like 2 more announcements, and you're going to get freebies, which is always good. Can you hear me? Is it loud enough? I can. All right, good. So the inner HTML apocalypse. And as Jon already introduced me properly, my name is Mario. I'm a researcher at the Ruhr University in Bochum. Some call it RUB. I have a pen testing firm. We do consulting workshops, trainings, and some other things. I've written some books, written some papers, maintained the HTML5 security cheat sheet, and some other projects I'm going to talk about in 2014. And I do like everything that is in between lesser than and greater than. It has always been the way. I love HTML. It's so complex. It's so huge. I love XML, HTML 2.0 until 5.1, where it meanwhile arrived. I love JavaScript, JScript, which is of course fundamentally different from JavaScript. I love Visual Basic Script, which luckily is still around in Internet Explorer. I like to play with plugins, with ActiveX controls, with editable rich text, scalable vector graphics, MathML, XLS, everything that is out there that is somehow in between these magic characters. I've been researching on the field of cascading style sheets, scriptless attacks, ECMAScript 5, DOM clobbering, and so on. What I totally don't do is binary stuff, so I simply, this is just not possible with the size of my head. I can't. So I'm doing anything that is in the scripting world, and that's fine, I guess. I like offensive security, talking about injection scenarios, active file formats, parser analysis. I really like old features. Like whenever I find like an old feature in a browser that is still alive, which is like from the 2000s, it's just like, oh my god, that really gets me going. Defense is interesting as well, but not that interesting, of course. It's just like, blah, defense. XSS filters, I rather like to bypass them. Web application firewalls, IDS systems. I've been working with CSP a little bit. Our future research will present like a very elegant bypass that is happening because of the Google library, hey Eduardo. And I've been working with DOM policies, with a trusted DOM, and I actually did my dissertation on the topic of like a trusted frozen DOM that you can use to give your website a little bit of extra security. You might ask yourself the question, why is there another talk on XSS? Because XSS has been talked about like so many times, and there can't be anything new in this topic. Well, first of all, I think in general, HTML as such is on its way to ultimate power. We have websites, of course, like, consequently. We have applications. We have instant messengers that use HTML. We have email clients that use HTML. We have local documentation floating around on our hard disks that use HTML, presentations that use HTML. We have router interfaces, coffee machine interfaces, even medical devices. So there's like a URL that I want to show you, which is really scary. Let me just click on this and hope something happens. Oh yes, something does happen. So there's like this company in the States, and it's called Spectrum Medical, and they have like solutions for their pacemakers and all that stuff, and totally flexible and field upgradable via web interface. Like, fuck me, sorry, it's just like, I don't want to have HTML on my head. No, just no. Anyway, we can see HTML in operating systems, in Windows 8, in Tizen, and basically the most important components that we're talking about is HTML plus the document object model, plus a little bit of JavaScript, and gluing this whole thing together, we have like the bait of great powerful applications. Like very close and even further than desktop applications. And look at freaking Gmail. Like Gmail is amazing. Like it's so big. I don't use the web frontend anymore because I fear XSS. But if you have a look at how many JavaScript files are actually being transferred from the Gmail server to your browser, I measured it in January 2013, maybe it's more meanwhile, and it was like 3.5 megabytes of compressed JavaScript. Like who wants to debug that? Like seriously, who wants to have a look at 3.5 megabytes of JavaScript? Not me. Anyway, we can realize that HTML applications or websites are not websites anymore, but actually full-blown complex applications. And of course, the defense has also scaled over the years. Thank you, sir. We have several layers of defense. We see like network-based defense, IDS, IPS, WAF, server-side defense, mod security, and all that stuff. Other firewalls that attempt to do something. We have client-side defense, like the browser-based XSS filters, which are quite good. Meanwhile, we have CSP, which is a different topic. We have NoScript, which is amazing. I use it myself. But all of these layers have this kind of attribute that you can say, like, at some point we bypassed them, then they fixed, and then we bypassed it again, and then they fixed again. And it was like an ever-occurring game that we played with them. And, well, it didn't really change. Like, we still have web security problems, right? So it didn't really accomplish anything in this field. We have tons of documentation. We have papers, wiki pages, sometimes even good documentation, talks, blog posts, tweets. Like everybody talks about web security. And one might think that those three horsemen are covered quite well. I know you might, of course, ask yourself, and it gets a bit kitschy now, what are these three horsemen this dude is talking about? Well, I came to realizing when I had a religious moment that cross-site scripting in its three kinds is very close to the horsemen of the apocalypse. So we have reflected XSS. And that closely reminds me of the white horse, which is purity, easy to understand. You have some stuff in the URL, and you can see that, and it says scriptlet 1, and done you are. And you can easily understand that, easily detect it, easily prevent it. So not that bad. Then you have stored XSS, the red horse war. And it's harder to detect because you actually have to deal with user-generated content that is supposed to contain rich text, but you have to filter the good from the bad. You have to tell them apart and make sure that the good is going through and the bad is staying out. So it's a bit harder. And then we have, of course, like DZ, mXSS. This thing, you can't really do anything against mXSS except for writing secure code. We have this gentleman over here who wrote a tool called Dominator, and he's going to talk to you tomorrow. And he can tell stories about mXSS, I guess. And mXSS is nasty. Because like I said, there is no actual defense. The only defense is not to have a bug. That's the end. Like, that's mXSS. Embrace it. Well, what is a proper apocalypse? And I have been promising an apocalypse without the fourth horseman. And the pale horse in his rider was named Death and had his wolf-following clouds behind him, and so on. So, given that I'm talking about a horseman in XSS, and a fourth horseman means that there might be a fourth order XSS, like a fourth kind of XSS that you maybe do not know yet, but I'm maybe going to show you. Let's have a look. Out of the kitchen, let's get technical and see some code. I'm going to show a lot of live demos, and I hope you guys in the last row can actually read this. If not, don't be shy, just come in front, because it's really important to understand the message of this talk. If you can't see the code, it's going to be complicated. I'm trying to zoom in, but we're going to make it. So, when we talk about XSS, and we talk about how to fix it and prevent it and so on, we need to talk about some assumptions, where it's coming from, what it's doing. Our first assumption is reflected cross-site scripting comes in via URL, via parameters, maybe via cookies or posts and so on. And we can just filter that stuff, and it's going to be fine. Persistent XSS comes usually in via post, via files, uploads, and stuff like that. We can, again, go ahead, just filter properly. Install a library that is allowed or that is capable of telling apart the bad from the good in the HTML the user submits and only shows the good and throw away the bad. DOM XSS, and this is assumption number 3, comes from DOM properties, like DOM things arrives in DOM sources, arrives in DOM things, and then executes. So we should just not use that stuff in an alt-filtered manner. We should be very careful with the things, and we just need to create safer JavaScript business logic. But we can actually fix it, because we can see the attack, and something does something, and we can fix against it, because we know this thing. And that is crucial to understanding the next things, that we know the attacks, we understand them. So following these 3 rules, that we derive from these assumptions, handle uploads properly and set some headers right, we can actually mitigate XSS. So we can create websites that are properly secured against XSS. Can we? Right, we can. We should be able to do so. We can. Or maybe not. So let's first talk about this telling apart, like this thing with the persistent XSS, where we have to know, like, this is good HTML, this is bad HTML, the bad HTML goes away. We have some pretty awesome filter libraries out there. So we have the OWASP anti-semi, and I think what's called like XSS filter project, maintained by some brilliant minds, and it's really a good library. Like, I tried to break it, and I had pain doing so. There's HTML Purifier, which is written in PHP, which is pretty good, but we broke it multiple times, and there's still one gaping hole in there. We have safe HTML from a large company, which meanwhile is quite secure. We have JSoup, which is a catastrophe. Don't even think about using it. It's so broken. We have many others out there. So basically, we have libraries that take arbitrary HTML and give back the good stuff. They're being used in webmailers and content management systems and social networks to make your profile now look nice. You can see them in internet applications and external applications in the www, and messenger tools like, for example, Skype or ICQ or Pigeon or wherever you take, they all use HTML, and they will filter stuff and make sure that nothing bad goes through. You can even find them in mail clients, like, for example, Thunderbird, which is also just using HTML parser. And they are more or less the major gateway between fancy user-generated rich text that we want because it's so awesome, and a persistent XSS, which we don't want. I want it, but most of you probably not. And so far, he wants it too. Yeah. He's a good boy. Um, those things are known to work pretty well because we haven't heard about like a major bypass in one of the huge filter libraries in the past, because if there was one, shit would really break. Like big applications would fall apart, and there would be like really, really big problems out there if there was just like a huge gaping XSS in Yahoo Mail or a huge gaping XSS in other big mailers and so on. So, but now we ask ourselves, since we're attackers, can we somehow fool these tools? Can we somehow get around these libraries without doing anything that the library would consider to be bad, and just count on someone else who's going to do the bad for us? And can we maybe even bypass every single one of these libraries? Well, meanwhile, we can't anymore because they fixed, but we could once. And, well, you guess it, the answer to this question is, of course, yes. And there is a reason for that. And this reason is convenience. This lady has it all. Like, she has like the perfect kitchen, white laptop, I don't know how she keeps it clean, white cup, and she's like, everything is convenient in her life, which is good. She's happy. Like, everything around her is built up perfectly, and everything's easy and nice workflows. So convenience is a good motivator. And for the reason of convenience, Microsoft invented a very convenient DOM property some decades ago. And this DOM property was available starting in Internet Explorer 4, so it's really some time ago. Do you know how many years it's like Internet Explorer 4? Like 25, 35, 18 something? I don't know, it's long ago. This property allowed us, or allowed developers to manipulate the DOM without actually even manipulating it, but have the browser do the dirty work. So you had to do nothing else but also, for example, grab like a DOM element and say like, hey, I'm going to just access that DOM element's inner HTML property, and you get all the HTML that is inside this element. You can read it, you can write it, you can do stuff with it, and you get around all this tedious DOM interaction that you usually have to do, like this, oh, do this and do that and do that. So it's like really, really convenient and really easy to use. And look at this, like here's a nice example. So this is like the DOM way, the true way, the metal way, to just like pick the element and just like select the element and create another element and create a text node and fill this with stuff and append it again, and then no one wants to do that. But this is the inner HTML way. You just pick the element, grab it, and just put some inner HTML in there, and you have the very same effect. So it's like 3 lines, 2 of which are not even necessary, versus 100 lines. So it's easier and more convenient. And the good thing is, there is more pros and even less contrast. It's easy, like I already said. It's fast. It's now a standard, so it's not even off standard anymore. Every browser supports it. It just works. It even has a big brother called outer HTML. I don't have to explain what this does. It's not always very friendly with tables, so sometimes when you work with inner HTML and tables, things go wrong. It's a bit slow, but only on older browsers. It's actually quite fast on modern browsers. There's benchmarks you can have a look at, and inner HTML is really, really fast, even compared to standard DOM transactions. It doesn't always work in the XML world, but we don't want to be in the XML world anyway. And it's of course not as true as real DOM manipulation, like you could see one slide ago. So if you want to do it the true style, true way, then you have to do DOM manipulation. But we don't want to do that. We want convenience. I wanted to find out who uses it. And back then, please Google bring it back, Google Code Search. I miss you so much. I consulted Google Code Search and fired a regular expression, and Google Code Search told me like there is like 184,000 projects that seem to be using inner HTML and outer HTML. That's a lot. And then I asked GitHub, I said, hey GitHub, how's it going? How many projects, how many files actually use inner HTML or outer HTML? And GitHub said like, yeah, about 2 million, no, 1.2 million. That's also a lot. And then I crawled the Alexa top 110K and asked like, hey, Alexa, just how's it going on your index pages with inner HTML? And again, we found a lot of usage of inner HTML. I think it was like 75%. Of course, these values are a bit blurry, but you can see this property is being used because it's awesome. It's a good property. And another field of applications that makes use of inner HTML is, of course, rich text editors. Whenever you see an application that has a rich text editor, you can be sure that some code in there actually uses inner HTML. jQuery uses inner HTML, for Christ's sake. Whenever you have something that is editable, content management systems, web mailers, email clients, they all use inner HTML. So this property is really around, and that is good. It's not a bad property. Now, there must be some kind of problem with this, right? I'm not going to finish the talk and say, okay, that's it. Let's go home. That was an awesome event. There is, of course, a problem with this. And we, again, need to work with some assumptions. And we need to assume that, or first we would like to assume that what we pump in there, like what we assign to inner HTML, is in result the same that goes out. So if we put, for example, something interesting in there, then we expect that the same thing is coming out. which is of course not the case. It can't be the case, because inner HTML works in a way that the browser has to fix stuff for you. If you're a developer and you, for example, submit incomplete markup and assign it to an inner HTML property, then the browser has to fix the markup for you to correct your mistakes and doesn't destroy the structure of the DOM tree. So the browser has to change things when assigning and when reading from inner HTML to make sure that things don't break. And that is quite good. It's good for performance. It's good to fight off sloppy developers, and it's just making sure that there's no illegal markup that can arrive in an otherwise sane DOM tree, and that is actually what the browser is supposed to do. So, and to be able to test this easily, we created a little test suite, and this test suite has been available outside for quite some time. And in this test suite, you can just have a look at some examples. And now I really need to sit down because I just got to write some stuff. Let's take, for instance, one of my favorite browsers, which is IE8. I don't know, I'm not sure why everybody hates on IE8. So here's our tool. And the tool is quite simple because everything that it does, it has a text area here, and then it takes the value of the text area, maps it as the inner HTML of like just a standard div, and then reads out the inner HTML of that standard div, and maps it into yet another test area so we can find out what happened to it. So let's go ahead and write some HTML. So we just start as S000, and then close the thing. Everything's fine. So here we have a lowercase s, 3 zeros. We close the whole thing because we're nice. And wait, here's a change. Something is different here because we see an uppercase s. So we type a lowercase s, but here we see an uppercase s. So the browser transforms it from lowercase into uppercase. Not that bad. We can live with that. And that isn't reasonable because back then when HTML4 was around, element names were supposed to be uppercase. So fair enough. And now we're a little bit sloppy and just remove the closing s. And you can see nothing changes down here. So IE and every other browser adds the closing s for us because it realized like, hey, you didn't close that thing, and if I take it and map it to an element and actually break the structure, so I'm just gonna close it for you. And it's like, wow, thanks IE, that's nice, that's cool. So you can even go like here and add this, no changes, and like this, no changes, and like this, no changes. Oh, there is a change. All of a sudden we have like a closing B. But well, browsers do that. But you can see the browser fixes stuff for us to make sure that things don't get messed up by faulty assignments to inner HTML. Oh, that's maybe another nice example. For example, if you go here and say like div, and then you say like class, and you have like an empty class, 1, 2, 3, and you can see you have the div, and the browser is closing it for us, but it just omits the class because the class is empty anyway, and to save some money and some performance, the browser decides to, come on, let's not give it to the render engine, let's just throw it away because we don't need it anyway, it's empty. Fair enough. So we write then something in here, so like foo, and all of a sudden it appears. And well, there's something interesting here. So we have like double quotes here and no double quotes. Anyway, let's just ignore this. So we can do funny stuff with comments, and this is actually like, I think we have enough time to do so. We can do funny things with comments. Just go ahead, for example, do like this, and then we close this thing, and A and then B. And the comment appears. This is like an older browser, so we take like a newer browser, like for example recent Firefox. Try the same thing. Zoom it in a little bit. Then we can again see, okay, we have the A and the B, and there's the comment in the middle, and we have like 2 dashes here. But Firefox says like, 2 dashes? I don't know, dude. I just gotta give you 4 dashes. Okay, 4 dashes. Let's give it a 3rd one. Still 4. Let's give it a 4th one. Hey, that makes sense. Let's give it the 5th one. Oh, there's 5, 6, 7. Okay, now it starts making sense. Let's go back. 6, 5, 4, 3 ends up as 4, 2 ends up as 4, 1 ends up as 5, none ends up as 4. And that makes sense. That makes perfect sense, because if we have a look at how HTML comments are being constructed, it's just like the lesser than, the exclamation mark, minus minus, or dash dash, then something that is commented out, and then again dash dash and greater than. So if I have none at all, then the browser assumes that there is a comment and automatically adds the 2 dashes twice, like dash dash for the beginning comment and dash dash for the ending comment. If I add 1, then the browser assumes, all right, this is going to be a comment, and there is like a commented dash. So it gives us 5, like 2 here, then the dash that we actually commented out, and then 2 here. And then we have like 2 again, so the browser assumes like, yeah, what you really meant was something else, because you really meant this, like an actual empty comment, and so on. It kind of makes sense. Like we can follow this thinking. So, but you can see even with the simple things, you can do funny tricks and impress your neighbors. now the question is, what does that actually have to do with security again? Because we have to at some point arrive at a state where we can say, yeah, this is some kind of security problem here. So we have to do some history lessons for that. Back in 2006, a fellow Japanese desk worker noticed a strange thing, magical, like really magical. So this dude was actually working on some HTML and creating like beautiful HTML, the forms and everything, and writing stuff in this form, and it was a good day. Like he just finished the form, and then he said like, hey, I'm gonna send this form to the printer and just print it out. And he went to the printer and they took the form, and he was like, oh, no, 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 because something was broken. And he realized that the values of the form elements that were perfectly fine on the website itself were bleeding out into the document, were part of the document and not the value of the form element anymore. So the form element was empty, and the value of the form element was somewhere in the document and not inside the input element as the value of it. It's like, well, what is going on? And I think he at some point filed a bug and said like, yeah, there's like this thing when I print stuff, and someone said like, yeah, we're gonna have a look at that, and nothing ever happened. And 1 year later, Yosuke Ashigawa from Japan, security researcher, analyzed the problem and found the actual first pointer to what we call mXSS, that fourth rider, that fourth horseman. And we call it mutation XSS because stuff mutates. Now let's have a look. This actually doesn't work on modern browsers anymore, which is good. It took us a while to get it fixed, but meanwhile it is fixed. It actually was fixed this year. And I have an old version of IE8 here, and no, I'm not a victim of and so on. And let's remember we had this funny thing with the class. So we go ahead and say, like, for example, p class equals blah. So 1, 2, 3. And we see it closes like the p for us, and here's the 1, 2, 3, and here's class blah. But we don't have any double quotes, because double quotes cost money, and we don't want to spoil all the money. We just want to make sure that the browser is fast. So the browser decides to just remove the double quotes and make it a bit faster. We're like, okay, if there is no double quotes, then theoretically we can break out of this thing with like just a simple space, right? You just go ahead and say like, whoops, and the double quotes are coming back. And the space is gone again, double quotes are gone. Add a space here, and the double quotes are back. So, okay, that's interesting. So maybe there's another vector. Maybe you just use single quotes. Single quotes. And the double quotes are back. So the browser notices that I'm planning something here and defends against it. And now I have a question for you, dear audience. How many ways do we know to delimit the values of attributes? First, no quotes at all. Second, single quote, correct. Double quote. And is there another one? Backticks. Oh, that's unfair. You of course know it. Backticks. Yes, you can use backticks in IE, at least in older versions, to delimit the values of attributes. So you can do something like that. Ta-da. What? Oh, we don't need it, actually. We just need that. Is that okay? So we need. No, I clicked something. That was bad. We need this and we need that. Let's just. I think I did something terrible right now. Thank you. Anyway, so yes, Java version. Cool. This is the right time to do so. So I added this to backticks, and all of a sudden we have an empty class and the attribute blah. So this is like an entry attribute now. So all of a sudden, without actually injecting or invalidating or breaking the document structure, the browser broke it for us. It's like, how is that? That is not good. So let's try to do something nasty with that and try with an image. So like image source equals blah x and alt equals something. Let me say alt equals, alt doesn't work anymore. Class equals something. Then we again see empty class, nothing happens. Then we add something in here, double quotes missing. So we make this class empty, and then we say on error equals alert 1. That is how sneaky we are, and there we go. And this is bad. This is like really bad, because we have script execution from within a completely valid attribute. And this attack that was not really published, like there was some spots where this was published for years, but no one kind of saw it. We had it on the HTML5 security cheat sheet for ages, and everybody ignored it. Like everything out there was vulnerable against it, like Yahoo Mail, something that starts with G, and something that Eduardo works for, and many other applications. Meanwhile, things are good, and the stuff is fixed. So IE8 doesn't do this anymore. So well, this is how you should react. It's just for reference if you don't want the slides. Well, it's pretty bad, but it's not new. It doesn't work anymore. There's a patch, which is good, and it's totally not new, and it's really not new. Most people like it, but it's absolutely not new. But the question is there new? And yes, we have new, and we're going to show you new. So there's another thing that is also not super new, but pretty cool, and that is unknown elements. So maybe you take an older browser that is not really trusted to working with HTML5 and all these fancy things, then for example, throwing an article or a menu or an aside element or a footer element at this browser might confuse the browser a little bit. So let's go ahead and again take my very old friend. Like, hey, old friend, what do you think about accepting like an X element? Or let's just be honest, like an aside, like it's good HTML5. So like aside, 1, 2, 3. And then we notice like, wait a second. So we have the aside here, and we have 1, 2, 3 here, so it's just being completely swallowed. Interesting. So there is definitely like a different execution path inside the browser doing different stuff. Because if you, for example, just call it P, then the P's appear. But if you call it aside, an unknown element in this very situation, it's not going to be appearing at all. So let's be nice in closing it and just add the slash and hello. The closing one is here, but the opening one isn't. Sure, that's expected. So let's add a 0 in front of it. And all of a sudden, if you have some content in front of it, we see like, hey, we have the opening aside, we have the 1, 2, 3, and the closing aside. So, well, this is quirky already. We don't really have an attack. But what do you do as a developer if you have an unknown element and if you want to tell the browser, hey, browser, I have plans with you, so here's some instructions on how to deal with this element. What do you add then? Of course, an XMLNS, like an XML namespace attribute. So you go ahead and select XMLNS equals something. And strangely, let's just be nice and add this 0. Strangely, again, this acts differently from class, because if we have an empty class, it just disappears. If we have an empty XMLNS, it does not disappear, because there might be something, there may be empty is even good. And another price question is, like, what happens if I write anything into this attribute? Like, what's going to happen? Who knows what's going to happen, aside from the people who already saw the talk? Like, what's going to happen? Well, let me just write something in there and focus your eyes on what's happening here. Let me just write an X in there. And boom goes the dynamite. There's like a huge processing instruction, like a monstrosity, just like, oh, question mark, XML, colon, what? Prefix equals limited by rectangular brackets X, and what in Christ's name is going on here? It's like, what is that? I've never seen something like that. Well, that is how this browser deals with unknown elements. And if you look closely, you see this is properly quoted, this ain't, and we can just like go ahead and do like this, img src equals, you know it. What's going to happen? You know what's going to happen. And there we go. So this is like the next attack. This doesn't work anymore, at least not that easily, so you've got to be smart if you want to make it work. But the good thing is that most HTML filters actually do not accept XML namespaces. This wasn't found by me. This was found by Level 1 from Russia. But I found something else, which is also cool. So let's go back and let's be not so nice and not close this element. Just remove this thing, and we know already, okay, we have the opening thing and something's happening here, but we don't have this weird explosion. Like, there's not this kind of detonation of markup happening in our DOM. But there is another way to actually specify namespaces, and that would be using the colon syntax. So we can, for example, say foo colon bar. And oh my god, all of a sudden we have bar colon aside. Well, interesting. That's neat. So, what could we do? Like, what is the character that we can never use in XML namespaces? Like I already said it, space, precisely. Oh, we have a bar element. Ouch. Let's make an image. Oh shoot, we have an image. Here it is. So, well, what's going to happen right now? You know what's going to happen. So it's equals X on error equals alert. And there we go. And I think we have to close it. No, what's going on here? I think I mistyped somehow. Oh no, I think I missed the alert. There we go. Took some time. Slow internet. Anyway, the first one was new, the second one was new, and you should react like this, just for further reference. So still, it's not entirely bad. Few websites allow XML and S. Everybody will allow article though, so if you have an older browser, but your filter allows HTML5 elements, then there is like this kind of thing with unknown elements already. But in the end, it's not that super bad. And there's like some tricks to level some browsers into the right document modes, but we're not going to elaborate on that because of timing reasons. Now, we're going to have a look at some actually real bad things that still haunt modern applications and that still do haunt modern browsers, and that you, as defenders of your web application, should definitely know when you deal with user-generated markup. Everybody loves style attributes, right? Like, style attributes are the best invention ever. Like, to take two languages and like smush them together and expect that nothing breaks. Nice one, really, really well done. Like, just inline styles is just such a bad idea. Like, ugh. Anyway, it's just CSS, and CSS can't hurt anyone, so it's just like style sheets. And surprisingly, most XSS filters actually do tolerate style attributes and some stuff in there. Actually, they go in there and have a look. Is it really just color? No, it's just color. That's cool. Let's go through with that. But you have to really watch the content closely, because many filters do accept things that do very surprising things. Like, we know from the past that there's like CSS expressions that hurt. We know that, we can file that away. We know that there's like HTML components, scriptlets, and all these things, but we can file that away. That doesn't really work anymore in text. We can do nasty stuff with absolute positioning, just overlap buttons with our own buttons. Well, that happens. Negative margins, negative borders, works in every browser, overlapping everything, even breaking the position relative sandbox. Anyway. But there is something with style attributes that is really, really, really bad, and it's affecting IE versions, it's affecting Firefox. The modern versions not anymore, and even IE is very, very close to fixing this in the modern document modes. In the older document modes, it still hurts a bit, but there is progress, and this is pretty bad. Let's have our friends have a look. So, we go here and zoom it in a little bit. I hope this, yeah, this should be still fine. And we say like, oh yeah, we have an element, and so like hello, and do it like this, and then we say like, for example, style equals color red. So this is fine, right? You know, like p style color red, right? I just have to make it a little think it's full screen, but it doesn't realize that it's not full screen. But no, you have to force it to think that it's full screen. All right, here we go. So this is fine. We have the style attribute. We have an extra space here because it's just like what's being expected, and the rest, I think, is quite okay. Now we change to a different document mode. We change to compatibility view mode, and we have a look at the same thing again. Again, we see, okay, this thing is red, but then we have like the uppercase P, and we have uppercase color. We again have the space, lowercase red, and hello, and everything's fine. So no attacks here. Another thing, for example, what could we do with font families? We can, for example, go ahead and say like font family equals monospace, and whoopsie daisy, everything is monospace like we expect. And then we come up with like our own fonts, and we say like, hey, our font is called like foobar. And then of course you can see we have the delimiter here, we have the delimiter here, the single quote, and the attribute delimiter here, and the attribute delimiter there, and everything's fine. It's called foobar. Now, let's try to play with CSS escapes with the hexadecimal representation of characters inside CSS strings, and just go ahead and, for example, say for 1. Well, this will turn into the uppercase A. And while the actual markup has the escape, the inner HTML representation decodes the escape and shows the canonical form of the character. And this is like, that's quite nice, and probably saves money, but might there be like a risk or something? And why not try, for example, the escape for the single quote to silently break out the string? And we have some Unicode, and we add the space, and all of a sudden we have the escape for the single quote, but still we have the real single quote down here, and that means that we could just like 3b, and then we can, for example, say color, and then we can say 3a, and then we can say red, and then we can just do this. Yeah, there is a missing space indeed. And we can see, but just using CSS escapes, the inner HTML representation of the element's content will turn the whole thing into the canonical form, and the thing is red. The actual thing is black, as it's supposed to be, whereas the inner HTML representation is red. So we have styles applying to the inner HTML representation that are not applying to the actual markup. That is bad. That's not good. So if you, for example, go ahead and turn this into something nasty, we can also go ahead and select expression. And I'm not going to do the alert thing now because then my browser has to be restarted. I'm just going to set something in location hash. So once you see change here, we actually execute JavaScript. We select expression location.hash equals 1. And we close the whole thing. And we can see, boom, there is the hash set to 1. So we have JavaScript execution. We can, of course, also encode this and just do it like that and use escapes again. And we can smuggle in our entire payload without even breaking the string, because the browser is breaking the string for us. So if your system, if your CSS filter doesn't realize that this is possible and that you can have trouble with using or allowing CSS escapes in your CSS strings the user submitted, then you have an XSS. End of story. So there's again the old man who's confused by what he's seeing. And the problem is with this thing that there is like many variations. Some of them have been documented on the HTML5 security cheat sheet for quite some time. Some of them are documented in the paper that we just got accepted, and you can look them up and just harden your application against that. Some of them don't work anymore. Some of them still work if the browser is in the right document mode, so make sure that the browser can go into older document modes. I'm going to show you later on how you do that. But so let's have a look at some of the variations that are actually quite funny. So we can, for example, go ahead and let's wait some second until the old friend is back. Let's just use this one. Or let's hope that meanwhile the thing is back. Please come back. Oh no. All right. I'm very sorry. Just gonna steal some valuable minutes and just kick it real hard. All right, there we are. Right. So let's, for example, go ahead and just say p style, and again font family, and then again we have this thing and foo bar. So can we maybe go ahead and not even break the CSS string, but also break the markup and inject something that turns out to become a double quote? Well, logically we would just go ahead and use the \22 and hope that it becomes a double quote, but surprisingly the double quote is not becoming a double quote, but a single quote. Again, someone smelled the attackers. They're like, no. This is kind of I'm not going to let this happen. So good for us, because we can't rely on only the \27 to be malicious. We can also use some padding and so on, and keep padding and pad. Ah, there we go. Enough for the padding. So this is one trick, and I was kind of obsessed with the idea of being that nasty that I can actually break the markup structure by using CSS escapes inside a CSS string, which is just like reaching through 4 layers, and then there's like a hand coming out of the toilet and grabbing for you, just being really bad. I'm sorry for this picture. So I was trying to trick with the string and doing stuff with the actual property value, until in a fever dream it came to me that I could also play with the property name. And I went on and tried and used like a backslash, and then use like the 22, and oh my god, we have the double quote. So we broke out the markup with like a CSS escape, and now we can start over and do nasty. So let's just like 3 E to close the whole thing, and then 3 C to open a new one, IMG, and then the space, and SRC equals, now we can't use equals for obvious reasons, so we have to go 3D, and then we say like X, and then we do another space, and then we do on error, and then again 3D, and then oh, this we can't do, alert, and then we use the parentheses, and we have to encode it too, and then another space, and then we do this, and ultimately we do that, and we have the alert, gentlemen and ladies. So this is just madness, but this is not really affecting too many web applications, because usually you cannot just tamper with the property name. Like there's some sort of validator in your code that says like, oh no, this kind of property name I'm not going to accept. So not that big of a problem. There was some other funny thing that I also found to be not really exploitable in the wild, but just interesting. So there's some properties where you know that they might cause damage, like font family, for example. And there's some other properties where you would never think that they cause any damage. So if you go ahead and, for example, say like color, and then you say like color red, then this happens. And this is quite interesting, because you realize all of a sudden that you have like this quoted string here, and the quotes are being removed. They're just entirely gone. So you could, for example, go ahead and say like expression, and let's do the octation thing again. Close the whole thing, and close it here, and surprisingly, nothing happens. So the browser realizes that this string is an invalid color and says like, nah, that's not a color. That's no, just don't even try. And there is another property that I really like, and I found it with just simple fuzzing, because otherwise you just don't kind of run into these things. I actually systematically try to find out which properties have this effect and do this. And it was something that I never expected to be evil, and this BORDER minus width. So we have border width, and I'm not sure why it doesn't work right now. Border width. What was it? Border radius. No, it wasn't the one. But there was another one. There were, for example, hello, and there was filter. And you can see even filter just removes single quotes. And filter is not as restrictive as color, so you can just go ahead and go to expression, location, dot hash. That's one, you close the whole thing, and boom goes to dynamite, and you have the JavaScript execution. So the browser is just going to entirely remove the single quotes for you, so you don't have to trick with escapes or stuff like that. And then there's like another really not so nice thing that I want to demonstrate real quick. Just like, okay. And that I realized when playing with multiple font families. So for example, if you go ahead and select font family, and you select foo, you select bar, then you would assume that there is like a font family that is called foo space bar. But you can also create like these fallback fonts. You can say, for example, my first font and my second font and the third font. And if this is not installed as well, then just use some other font or some other font family so the browser can pick a fallback. And interestingly, in this ancient mode, IE is very generous with us as developers, because once we use a comma, the browser assumes that this is multiple fonts and just removes the quotes for us. Again, so we have font family with a comma, the quotes are disappearing, as you can see here. Then we remove the comma again, and the quotes are there again. So again, you can of course go ahead and just look your expression magic in here, and then you have another XSS. But again, this is something that I haven't seen in the wild, so it's not really that bad compared to the other things that we actually can defend against. So, there's other possibilities you can work with. Chrome, for example, messed up heavily with text area. I think Eduardo found this, right? Eduardo, you still here? You found the text area bug, right, in Chrome? I think it was Chrome 12. I saw your ticket. It was you. Firefox screwed up with SVG like majorly, and you could do like this, like SVG in style, and then use entities inside there and create like HTML strings from entities. That was bad, but they fixed it. There was some problems with listings, and the biggest problems you can actually still find in all modern browsers once your page goes text XHTML. Never go text XHTML unless you have to, because this is opening a can of worms. You don't want to be there. Rather deal with all the HTML5 stuff, but never go XHTML. It's really, really bad for you. Everything that is inside C data will be decoded. This is the same, for example, with inline SVG. If you can't get your fingers off inline SVG for your website, just don't use it. Same with MathML. It's not mature yet. I mean, Chrome even removed it for quite some time. I think for the CanSec West, they just removed it, right? Because it was so crashy. Well, the question is, who is actually affected by these problems? Aside from the vendors that we reported to, most of the existing HTML filters and sanitizers, HTML Purifier was heavily affected. I think they had like 6 patches all over the place. JSoup, we didn't even report to those guys. This thing is too broken. They are affected. Anti-Semi was affected, but fixed it. HTML Lord is completely affected. Google Kaha was affected, but they fixed it after I spoke with Jasphere. Most, if not all, of the rich text editors that we tested were affected by these problems. Most of the existing web mailers are affected by this, like Roundcube is affected by this, Yahoo Mail is affected by this, and many others. Some we reported to, but at some point it just got too much with all the reports. We hope that the paper is going to fix something. But the bottom line is that basically anything that obeys standards and doesn't know about the specific problem is or might be affected if some countermeasures are not in place. Here is HTML Purifier being affected, and here is Google Kaha being affected back then, but they fixed it. You can see the stuff is coming through with the backticks. And here is the HTML lot demo that also looks quite it's affected, but you can realize here that it's like double encoded entities, and you might think like, if I just double encode all my stuff, I'm going to be safe from these kinds of attacks. But of course you are not, because if you access inner HTML once, you'll be safe. But if then the application accesses inner HTML for a second time, then it's gonna keep decoding recursively, and then you have the same problem again. So you can have quadruple encoding and just access inner HTML 4 times, and then it's going to be canonical again. So for your health. Yeah, this is usual reaction when I saw this kind of thing in trainings, and raises the question like how to protect, like what can we actually do? And luckily there is a lot of things that you can do and that are not so hard to deploy. First of all, make sure that your website enforces the browser to only use the standards mode. So what you want to do is do not use the old HTML4 doc types. Throw it away. You don't want to use it. Use the HTML5 doc type, this thing. Throw out everything else that you have in your websites, because if this thing is active, all the nasty things in IE don't work anymore and you're fine. Avoid getting framed. Use X-frame options, because then you're fine. You cannot be downgraded to another document mode anymore. Use CSP if you can. Motivate your users to upgrade their browsers. Avoid SVG in MathML like the devil avoids holy water, because this is not working out. This is not mature yet. Websites that have a decent complexity and cannot just deploy massive fixes or significant changes, patch your HTML filters. Make sure that certain characters cannot be part of CSS strings anymore. Remove the commas, validate better, find a better CSS filter. Employ strict whitelist, make sure that only color and only this and only that can go through and no arbitrary properties. Avoid critical characters in HTML attribute values. Slowly backtick out, replace it by something else. And again, be extremely paranoid about user-generated CSS, because it hurts a lot. Don't allow your users to submit too much CSS, because there's so many things they can do with it. And don't too strictly abide to standards, because the standards are not made entirely with security in mind. Sometimes it just doesn't work perfectly with the standards. Listen to your pen testers, listen to your security consultants, and don't listen to the standards all the time. Know the vulnerabilities, you know them now. And I guess for the pen testers here in the room, there's like a lot of bonus bugs. So when you're going out for a bug hunt next time, you might actually find some more things that could be useful for you. If you find not anything at all, try the backtick trick, and it always works. So. Huh? Sure. Go ahead. Just keep them coming. Since I have like mildly academic background, I try to have like a closer look at what other kind of mitigations we can install. And I wrote a small script that is intercepting inner HTML access and then using an XML serializer that the browser provides and kind of sanitizes the markup on its XML level and then passes it back to the inner HTML setter and then actually sets the whole stuff. So that is pretty safe, but it's also pretty slow. But you can have a look at this thing. There's a demo and you can download it and play with it. But it worked, like it mitigated all of the attacks, but the performance overhead was not so great. We described this thing in the paper too, so you can have a look once it's out within the next days or weeks. Well, just make sure that you, if possible, don't use any CData sections in your website. Just stick with HTML. Don't use XML as like the markup language you show to you that you expose to the users. And again, I can just repeat it: avoid SVG wherever possible. Don't use SVG. SVG is entirely broken. There is just like no way to fix it easily. So we arrived at the conclusion almost. What's the takeaway? As a pen tester, you have like a new wildcard bug pattern. Like you will definitely find more bugs in websites that accept user-generated HTML by using these technologies or using these tricks. As a developer, you have more and better info to protect your app. Like there is a new bug pattern that you can actually work actively against and protect yourself against. When I was presenting this in Singapore at SciScan, actually someone from an Asian company came to me and said, like, we saw these kind of attacks, but we didn't understand them, but we had them in the log. Unluckily, I never got samples, but he assured me that he saw these kind of attacks, these kind of mutation attacks. So that was kind of a surprise, but also kind of interesting, if not shocking. The browser vendors have a new problem zone to watch. Like inner HTML is gonna remain interesting, and the specifiers might have some hints for upcoming specs. And Gloria, there is like an upcoming spec, and there's like an entire spec that is evolving almost exclusively around inner HTML. And it's being almost maintained and updated almost daily. So you can have a look at this thing, you can contribute, you can criticize, just see what people are doing, how people are specifying this right now, and make sure that these kind of mistakes don't happen again, and that the specification is actually going to be good. So, wrap up. Today we had some HTML DOM browser history insights. We have seen some old yet undocumented or unknown attacks that we revisited. We saw some fresh attacks. We have a new pentest joker. We learned about some new guidelines on how to defend against these things, and we also saw the possible W3C silver bullet that maybe is gonna be effective in 2015 or whenever, so let's see. That's basically it. Credit where credit is due. Main credit goes to Gareth Hayes, who unfortunately cannot be here because he's sick. Best wishes. Credits go to Yusuke Ashigawa from Japan, who did a lot of pioneering work on this. Credits go to Level 1 from Russia, who contributed some of the vectors. Eduardo, of course, Dave Ross, who's here, for allowing me to actually publish this research at some point, and Stefano Di Paola, who's just Stefano, like, what you hear. Thank you very much, that was it. I know. We were in contact. You're actually immune to all this. Like, we were in contact. Like, after
He's talking about the HTML sanitizer.
Yeah. 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 I rarely say this, but you did a great job. It's safe. Like, I couldn't find anything. So I hate saying this. My teeth actually actively hurt. Yep. If you have a good style validator and you use actual style tags and not style attributes, then you can do many things because this doesn't decode. Only if you use style attributes, you're at risk, so avoid style attributes. Like I said, style attributes, everybody likes them. Thank you. It's not mine alone, like I said, so it's definitely shared research and shared credit.
Okay, so before thanking the speaker once again and all the other speakers, I'd just like to mention that we do have a conference dinner tonight.